Disclaimer. This content is created based on my unprofessional opinion and analysis of related topics for social communication purposes, to expand our mutual views by discussing and analyzing the matters. The source of information and evidence for this content is social media, which contains facts, rumors, and some other fragments without proof for their authenticity or accuracy. So, please pay special attention. There is no claim on the reliability and confirmation of the conclusions presented here.
Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well and enjoying life to the fullest. In this video, I want to discuss my opinion about the FBI's role in this case. But first, it should be noted that, since I have created my channel recently and don't have a complete archive of what has happened so far, I couldn't gather information in real time as events unfolded. Thus, now I have to search through websites or rely on my memory to find the relevant details. In this regard, there is no issue with any topic or information that has been circled on the internet and has been the subject of discussions once or more, but the problem is with the points that caught my attention when they emerged, but they were overshadowed by more general topics, which caused those details yet crucial points to be ignored and overlooked by true crimes channels. Although they impacted my insight and concept of the case, I couldn't find direct and exact sentences referring to each one in any of the sites I searched, due to being mentioned in passing and not officially recorded or being focused on anywhere. Therefore, in such cases that I couldn't access precise and direct quotes from them, I've had to rely solely on my memory and recall them in the context of other topics. Therefore, if you have any access to the FBI's direct statements related to the points presented here, I would be very grateful if you kindly let me know in the comments. Now let's get into it. As my topic shows, I believe the state, in addition to other manipulations, has misused or outsmarted the FBI too. I think so because throughout this case, I always sensed the FBI's presence on the sidelines and not at its core. And to me, the state acted preemptively and involved the FBI and other agencies with issues they themselves had defined, to ensure that things wouldn't unfold automatically, and to avoid having to hand over everything to the FBI and other agencies. I merely focused on the FBI because it was never determined to me who those other investigators were. It is enough if any of those agencies had been there to assist and watch this video, only to review in their mind the way they had been treated by Moscow, Idaho's authorized individuals who were required to cooperate with those agencies related to handling needed information to them, and whether these assistant agencies had been free and supported in their needed investigation route, or they were being hindered subtly through some planned coincidences or being given evasive answers for their needed information, or anything like these. However, as I have noticed, its name and role have been referred to in this case at least in 5 circumstances. Dear viewers, please make sure you pay extra special attention to these points. I wish someone from the FBI organization also would watch this video to see if I'm correct or not. I kindly ask any of you who have a contact at the FBI to let them know to watch this short video, please, and share their opinion about it. Now let's review those circumstances in which the FBI has been brought up in this case. First, the prosecutor's side wanted to give credibility to their investigation process, and consequently, its result in general. Second, whenever a dispute arose, the prosecutor's side would hide behind the FBI's name to place all the blame on it, like when both the defense team and the families of the victims had raised concerns about the role of the FBI and law enforcement during the investigation. The defense's primary criticism centered on how the FBI and law enforcement had used investigative genetic genealogy to identify Kohberger as a suspect. Kohberger's attorneys argued that the process might have violated privacy rights and that the exact methods used by the FBI were not fully transparent. They sought access to detailed information about the genetic techniques, questioning whether the FBI had followed proper procedures when obtaining DNA links from a knife sheath found at the crime scene. The defense believed that the case relied heavily on this DNA evidence, and if the FBI mishandled the process, it could create reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, some of the victims' families, notably the parents, have expressed frustration with how the investigation was handled.
We're just left in limbo.
particularly regarding the initial response by the Moscow police. Early in the investigation, the local police were criticized for their slow action and communication, which raised doubts about whether the case was being handled competently. However, criticism of the FBI's involvement specifically had not been as prominent from the families, as the federal agency stepped in later to assist. In this regard, as I remember, but couldn't find the exact quote or statement by the FBI, in response, the FBI asserted that they have no obligation to answer to either party during the ongoing investigation. This was when I realized that the prosecutor's side must have subtly involved the FBI in a way that played into their agenda. It seemed to me they must have used the FBI's role without the agency being fully aware of how they were being maneuvered. I believe they still don't know. This was when it came to my mind that the DNA sample must have been gained through the process that I discussed in my previous video. The FBI had no fault or flaw in handling the IgG process to identify Brian as the suspect, and also had no role in delaying the DNA process. As it was mentioned earlier, the FBI stepped in later to assist. The ambiguity regarding the IgG process argued by the defense team and the delay in handling the process by the local police argued by the victims' families are both because of this. As I discussed in my previous video, there was no knife sheath at the murder scene and consequently no DNA sample. And to me, the state had realized that this murder had witnesses, which must have worried them a lot. So they did everything they could to find the witness and not the murderers. During this period, Brent Kopacka was killed, and some hours later, they pulled Brian over on their way to Pennsylvania. In fact, it was at this moment, which was about 32 days after the incident, Brian's father's DNA was obtained by the MPD or LE through deceit and trickery. They gained his father's DNA sample and just started to establish a manipulated base for the rest of the process. This way of accessing Brian's father's DNA sample was the reason for the defense team's confusion on the origin of the DNA, and also the reason for the delay that the victims' families were disappointed. From this moment on, the MPD's and the prosecutor's job were just started. Then they arrested Brian and took his DNA sample through a cheek swab and the rest of the story. To me, there couldn't have been any manipulation in the laboratory procedure of the IgG, or DNA sample. All could have been correct without violating any privacy rights or tampering with the process. The manipulation must have been done in the sample collecting phase and before being handed to the FBI for the laboratory process. In fact, I believe there couldn't have been collusion between the prosecution and the FBI. Instead, the MPD must have deceived the FBI and used them to give credit to all their own manipulated and staged evidence. They used the FBI as a shield to do what they wanted, without attracting any suspicion towards themselves. Third, Mr. Bill Thompson sent 2 FBI agents to Ms. Vargas's residence to speak with her.
Have been opted out. Something in Vargas's testimony piqued the interest of the FBI after the prosecutors heard she may have been reneging on some of her testimony or a sworn declaration that she signed. Kohberger's lead attorney explained what happened from her vantage point.
Last night, she was visited by 2 FBI agents and interrogated about her testimony and the timing of her declaration. That, in our view, impacts Mr. Kohberger's due process rights and his rights to effective assistance of counsel.
Ann Taylor told Judge John Judge that she would file a motion regarding what happens to witnesses after they testify in court. But there are questions about whether the FBI agents visiting Vargas was proper. I spoke with former FBI agent Tracy Walder about it.
She is well respected in her field. Certainly, she's testified at trials before. But if you have 2 agents showing up at your front door, I think anyone is going to have a defensive reaction to that, right? Because they're not there for good news typically. And so I do think it would have been much better had Ann Taylor had someone from the defense team accompanying her to a local FBI office for this interview to take place, because I think that just would have been much more comfortable all around versus someone basically surprising you in your home. And there's a reason that we do that, right? Is to catch people off of their guard. And so I think that might be some of the issue at play here. And I hate to go back to perception because it's so nebulous, but I think that's part of the problem.
Although the two FBI agents did not visit Mrs. Vargas to threaten or intimidate her, Mr. Bill Thompson, knowing the impression their presence could make on her, effectively used them as a subtle and symbolic message between himself and Mrs. Vargas, even though the agents had no such intent. And even I think they might have had no idea about Mr. Thompson's real goal of sending them to visit her. Let's watch what Mr. Thompson presented as the reason for sending two FBI agents to her house.
Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson explained why he asked the FBI to investigate after hearing Vargas might be questioning some of her own testimony.
Since his voice was not clear to me, I tried to search for his statements in some sources. Ultimately, I could gather this information. After she testified in court, there were reports that she had provided contradictory statements regarding her testimony, leading the Latah County Prosecutor, Bill Thompson, to request an investigation by the FBI. Vargas later claimed that some elements of her testimony were agreed to or signed without her fully understanding or reading the details. This raised questions about the validity of her statements in court. The FBI's role was to interrogate her to clarify these contradictions and to understand the implications for Kohberger's due process rights. Of course, I believe, he claimed this reason to kill two birds with one stone, to cast doubt on the reliability of her testimony and at the same time intimidate her about continuing with it. This matter is the reason I don't even think that in the procedure of the IgG test, the loophole explained by Ms. Vargas could have been used when the state could have had a much simpler way to reach Brian's father's DNA and then his own. I'm almost sure even to this moment, the FBI hasn't realized what was the reason for those criticisms and controversies over the DNA sample. As I said earlier, I think the manipulation of DNA sample evidence must have been done in the sample collection stage and by the MPD, before handling the case over to the FBI. Also, Mr. Bill Thompson's goal of sending two FBI agents to Ms. Vargas's residence to intimidate her was to stop her from going further, which might have led to his tampering with the DNA evidence coming to light. Otherwise, if the process of collecting the DNA samples had been the way Ms. Vargas explained then, after Mr. Bill Thompson found the chance to cast doubt on her testimony's validity, don't you think he would have called an expert to court to challenge Ms. Vargas? Or don't you think he would cross-examine her to ruin her testimony's reliability when he had some mistakes of hers with him? However, we all witnessed how he treated Mr. Adelman, although he hadn't done anything wrong.
And your surveyors put that false information into the minds of people who were asked that question who may not have previously heard it. Correct.
Correct. Relative
Thank
to
you.
the media,
Thank you.
it's mentioned it hundreds and thousands of times.
And just make sure we're clear too, around the same time of your testimony, I believe you testified that you don't care if the information that you put in your specific questions to the people being surveyed is correct. That you said that, didn't you?
Right. I don't know what you mean by correct.
True or false?
And,
Now Thompson has told the court he will not cross-examine the witnesses that Taylor called to testify about genetic genealogy. Prosecutors had reserved the right to cross-examine some of the witnesses at a later date. Now they say, as I mentioned, that they are not going to do so, which also struck Tracy Walder as odd.
We all witnessed how he treated Mr. Adelman, although he hadn't done anything wrong. Then how come he settled for that much, only to send two FBI agents to her house? And even he didn't want to cross-examine her or call some experts in court to challenge her, although he had the opportunity to do that. Then why did he leave this issue there and let it go? To me, it must have been because the IgG test or procedure of examining the DNA sample couldn't have been through the loophole explained by Ms. Vargas. Therefore, Mr. Thompson tried not to focus on it very much, to keep the situation under wraps to prevent any exposure of the manipulation in accessing Brian's father's DNA and staging the evidence. By the way, please pay attention to another crucial point. The FBI agents are not required to wear body cameras to record their conversations, which could further complicate the situation.
FBI agents do not typically record interviews or wear body-worn cameras. It's not clear whether that happened in this case, or whether the agents simply took notes about the meeting with Vargas. The prosecution has filed information related to that under seal with the court, so the public cannot see it.
Even this was another advantage of sending the FBI agents that Mr. Thompson exploited and used to his benefit, knowing it would allow for conversations without any official recording. Fourth, the state used the FBI's presence in the case to exploit its credibility while keeping the process under its own control. Do you remember these gentlemen? Who are they? For sure they couldn't be FBI agents. Otherwise, there was no reason for them to try to hide their faces from the camera. So who are they?
So I'm just watching these guys as they're walking by you. Were you asking them questions and were they effectively just ignoring you? Did they say hello? Did they say anything at all?
Not a peep. And I asked them specifically, why are you here tonight? Why are you here tonight? They did not acknowledge me. So certainly they were on a mission and they left without saying a word.
So I'm interested when you said that there was a Washington plate, because the very first thing I thought of when I saw those guys is they don't look local necessarily. And I don't say that because they don't look like they're from Idaho. It just looks like they're moving in a particularly specific way.
Yeah.
And this late in the game, it just screams FBI to me, and maybe an FBI field office that's partially from Washington, maybe an FBI field office from the Idaho area. Did you ask if they were from FBI or what jurisdiction? And they just said, nothing to see here?
Yeah, they would give me nothing. And I did call Moscow police, no answer, no response. So no explanation for any of this, but they were clearly inside on a mission.
Is the FBI is not the dominant investigatory team in the Kohberger case.
Now let me tell you my guess on this as the fourth circumstance. The state side involved the FBI in the case. The FBI was called to assist with the case alongside other agencies to take advantage of the FBI's credibility while ensuring the FBI didn't have full control over the process. I remember once, it was reported that FBI officials expressed frustration regarding the investigation's handling by both investigators and prosecutors. They emphasized that their goal is to assist the public and that the actions of certain parties in the case could undermine that mission. They indicated that if these officials continued to mishandle matters, it could jeopardize the integrity of the investigation, suggesting that their focus should be on supporting the victims and community rather than complicating the case. They said something to the effect that some seek to discredit the FBI, blaming the agency for problems they themselves create. The best strategy to control the narrative and the process of the incident was that the Moscow, Idaho authorized individuals themselves to act preemptively, and by creating ambiguity and deliberately complicating the investigation scene, they themselves defined what the FBI should look for, because they knew what they didn't want the FBI to discover. The state manipulated the involvement of various agencies, in addition to the FBI, in this case, to create limitations for each of them. He gave the impression that certain tasks were being handled by other agencies, telling each that others were responsible for different parts of the case. This allowed him to keep critical aspects of the case under his control, while making it seem like the investigation was distributed. In reality, he kept key details to himself, ensuring they remained hidden. If only one agency had been solely responsible for handling this investigation, Bill Thompson would have been forced to disclose all details to that single agency. By involving multiple agencies and parties, he aimed to conceal certain information, misleading each one into believing that another was handling specific parts of the case. This way, he kept critical elements of the investigation hidden from all of them, ensuring that none had the full picture. Another reason for the state to call the FBI to assist with the case seemed to be because there were some doubts about the MPD's capabilities and some viral statements about their incompetency to handle the case properly. Also, by watching some acting like this, I think the MPD's possible poor performance could have been one of the excuses for calling the FBI to assist, but it also could be the result of keeping them away intentionally from being involved in cases like this for years. To me, it indicates that the local police have been intentionally kept away because some individuals in power didn't want them to become aware of some internal corruption in the local system. And I believe those individuals have been related to this murder through at least one of these three components of the incident. 1. The murderers. 2. The motive. 3. The victims. I will discuss this topic in my upcoming videos. I hope that if I have been correct about my opinion presented in this video, I will be acknowledged in some way. Thank you all for watching, and if you have found any helpful points to the case, please share it with others in any way. It doesn't matter to me if you share my videos directly through my channel or in any way you want. I wish you the best. Bye.